Hello, my name is Angie Bezick, and I serve as the Vice Chair for Legislative Affairs Committee for the Greater Williamsburg Chamber and Tourism Alliance Business Council. And I'm with Tom Cosgrove, who is the Vice Chair of the Virginia Peninsula Chamber. And we are delighted today to have Qasim Rashid, who is a candidate for the 1st Congressional District for the U.S. House of Representatives. Welcome so much.
Pleasure. Thank you for having me.
We are really pleased that you have agreed to talk to us today about the issues that are of importance to the business community here on the peninsula. And we have 5 questions on workforce, military, healthcare, transportation, and the economy. But before we get started with those, if you would just share a little bit about yourself with our viewers.
Sure. Thank you. So privileged to be here. My name is Qasim Rashid. I'm the Democratic nominee for U.S. Congress in the 1st District. And my story, I'd like to think, is the quintessential American story. Like 8 of the original signers of the Declaration of Independence, I'm an immigrant. My family immigrated here when I was 4 years old, the age of my wife, Aisha, and I's youngest daughter. We left a country that persecutes us for our faith to really pursue this promise of equal justice. That's, the sacred principle of our Constitution. It's a principle that we are constantly trying to achieve. And likewise, that's why our Constitution says to form a more perfect union. So this idea of becoming more perfect is sacred and ingrained in who our nation is and who Americans are. My siblings and I are fortunate that both of our parents are teachers. And so they really pushed us to be involved in our community, to be engaged. And they wanted us to center service to humanity. I can still recall at a very young age, this was the lead message, if you will. It became religion, that whatever you do in life, you have to center service to humanity. And that was a lesson that has served us well, especially as we struggled as well. When my brother enlisted in the United States Marines and was deployed as an active duty Marine, we did struggle. I mean, we were in Section 8 housing, lived off food stamps. I've been working since I was 15 years old and just learned very early on the value of $1 and the value of hard work. The blessings of this country, of the Almighty. We've emerged from that struggle. All 3 of my siblings are successful in the business world, and I'm a human rights lawyer. It was my wife, Aisha, that encouraged me to get into law school, and I got accepted at a great program at the University of Richmond School of Law. Go Spiders, if there's any Spiders watching. And at Richmond Law is where I really got ingrained in this human rights element. I started working pro bono at the Virginia Poverty Law Center, the Office of Domestic and Sexual Violence. I was a prison chaplain for about 4 or 5 years, worked with various nonprofits on healthcare and education expansion for children from lower income communities, and working on protecting religious freedom for persecuted Christians and Jews around the world. This is in fact work I've done with the US State Department under Mike Pompeo as well. I was privileged to be a private guest of Ambassador Sam Brownback as he toured the Holocaust Museum with survivors of persecution to really remember the dark times and make sure that we work together as one community to ensure those things never happen again. Combating wealth and income inequality has been at the core, especially because I know what it's like to not have enough. And recognizing that small businesses are the backbone of our country, I think has to be the foundational economic platform of anyone running for public office, and that certainly is of ours. And so my message is to take the work I've done as a human rights lawyer, fighting against wealth and income inequality, fighting to support marginalized communities, small businesses, and bring it out to be better policy so that that promise of equal justice and equal access that my family and I pursued can truly be achieved for all people of our Commonwealth and of our country. And I'm confident that by working together across a bipartisan spectrum, we can truly make that a reality.
Mr. Rashid, thank you for that introduction and for the shout out to our fellow Spiders. I appreciate that. We're going to start off on military and defense, and certainly the role that the defense industry has in our economy. In 2016, then candidate Trump advocated for what he termed a great rebuilding of the armed services, and since his election, he's approved budget deals with defense spending well over $700 billion. So a multi-part question, regardless of the outcome of the presidential race, would you support the continuation of the effort to rebuild the armed services? If so, how would you plan to fund the rebuilding given the increased cost of military personnel and acquisition? Or if not, where would you see cuts in the defense budget, and how would you reprioritize funding?
Well, absolutely. We need to ensure that national defense and national security is a priority, and there's no two ways about it. But we need to do it the right way. What I've advocated for is a smart military that is responsive to modern day threats like cyber attacks and climate change, and an efficient military that is not engaged in any kind of waste, fraud, or abuse. A recent study came out that that detected $125 billion of waste, fraud, and abuse being spent on the military. I think that's inefficient, and that is contrary to any fiscal conservative. It makes us less safe, it harms our military, and it certainly harms our service members. Former Joint Chiefs of Staff Mike Mullen said that our national debt is the single greatest national security threat. And he talked about how we can have the greatest military in the world, but if we have such massive debt that we can't pay them, then we're in a lot of trouble. And right now, unfortunately, under this administration, we continue to raise our deficit every single year. And the first problem was this massive tax cut for billionaires and billionaire corporations, while giving lower income communities and middle income communities a tax hike. That's a fundamental problem, because not only did it result in $1 trillion deficit annually, but now even on the interest of our deficit, by 2027, we're expected to be paying $1 trillion a year in just interest alone. So we need a more fair tax plan that lowers taxes on small businesses and lower income communities and middle class communities, and asks billionaires to just simply pay their fair share. That's how we emerged from the Great Depression. That's how we emerged from World War II. And frankly, that was under Republican leadership. So these ideas aren't by any means left-wing or right-wing. They're the right thing to do because we know that they work. And in doing so, we can get our military spending in a most efficient manner under control, ensure that we are rebuilding our military with the best technology out there, and making sure that we are not being held back by a massive deficit. One thing that really bothers me right now about the way we're spending money is, despite having a military budget 10 times the size of the next nation, 10 times more than the next nation combined, is that 1 in 5 military families in Virginia are on food stamps. This should be a moral outrage for every single person who truly cares about our service members. 22 veterans a day are dying by suicide because they can't get adequate mental health treatment. So I want to make sure that the money we spend is not lost to waste, fraud, and abuse. I want to make sure it's efficient. I want to make sure it's not on a credit card. And I want to make sure that the most important part of our military, our service members and then our veterans, are absolutely taken care of and prioritized, because they are the ones putting their lives on the line. We cannot leave them out to dry.
That's great. Thank you. Under the assumption that we would have a vaccine for COVID-19 by the end of the year, and that it's sort of leveled everybody, so we're all sort of on a level playing field, what 2 or 3 things do you think that Virginia should be doing now in preparation to be first out of the gate to accelerate our economy and thrive? And what do you think the business leaders should be preparing for in order to make Virginia a role model for a quick, successful economic recovery?
Well, I've spent the entire year traveling around the district, meeting with small business leaders and small business owners, and I've just seen the devastation firsthand. And it did not have to be this way. The vaccine, we hope it comes soon, but what I want to emphasize is that even before the vaccine gets here, we can and should be taking smart measures to prevent the spread of this virus. And had this administration listened to the scientists and the doctors, we could have seen a massive drop in the number of deaths, a massive level of safety for our small businesses, for our communities at large. What I called for back in February was, I warned in writing publicly, we are out of time. We need to fund the CDC immediately, and we need to act quickly. This was before a single American had died. After our first American death on March 1st, I said that we need mass free testing for every single American, every single person in this country. And now the science and the studies show that had we done that at that time, we could have gotten this virus under control immediately, and we could be life back to normal right now. Unfortunately, this administration and his supporters refused. They downplayed the virus. Now the public admissions are out that they deliberately downplayed the virus. So what I want to advocate for still is a massive mobilization of free testing for every single person out there, contact tracing for every single school, for every single small business, for every single organization, for every single person, and masks available to every single person as well. If we can do that effectively, again, the data and the science shows that we can get ahead of this virus within the next 4 to 6 weeks. If we do it now, even by election day, we can be nearly virus free. And instead, because of the failures of this administration, we are now facing 200,000 deaths, a 33% decrease in our economic output. I don't know how many businesses and small business owners have suffered the brunt end of this due to the failures of the relief packages. It doesn't have to be this way. We can still uphold science and move forward to protect our small businesses and protect our communities. And that's what I would ask Virginians to do even after this vaccine is available. But the good news is that we can do that right now.
Mr. Rashid, thank you. And moving over from the economy and to workforce, WIOA, the Workforce Investment and Opportunity Act, which has been critical in upskilling our underemployed workers and providing career opportunities for the unemployed, WIOA is due to be reauthorized in 2021. So what do you see as the current successes and challenges under WIOA, and what changes to the policy would you prioritize in an authorization, in a reauthorization?
Well, I recognize that small businesses are the lifeblood of our country. And right now we are facing a really terrible phenomenon of the worst wealth and income inequality in US history. It's worse now than it was after the Great Depression. And that should give us pause to think. I would want to see this reauthorization be more inclusive of the gig economy, of making sure that gig workers have the kind of support they need. Uber drivers, Lyft drivers, Grubhub. These kinds of institutions have historically been kind of a hotbed for wage theft. I want to make sure that we are being more inclusive of migrant workers. And again, this is a key component because many of our farms cannot thrive without the migrant workforce. And if we're not giving them the resources and the support they need, then we're undermining their safety and security and the overall economic safety and security of ourselves. I also want to see more consideration given to small businesses in general. I live in Stafford, Virginia, and talking to the folks here, one of the frustrations that they face is the amount of various kinds of taxes that they're responsible for on a local, county, state, and federal level. We need to find a better way to do this because the amount of burden we're putting on small businesses is putting them under immense kinds of pressure. And then finally, on a healthcare perspective, I would like for this act to contemplate a better way of looking at healthcare. I'm not a fan of employer-based health insurance for two main reasons. There are many more, but the two that are applicable here is it's a massive overhead for small businesses that puts them at much more jeopardy. And two, it's a massive deterrent to start your own small business because if you have to take on this massive overhead or if you have to quit your job that provides you health insurance to start your own small business, then you're actually risking your own life. So these are the high level things that I would look at and the localities and the situations where these resources have been made available. We've seen a massive economic output. We've seen more economic success of small businesses and more economic security of the middle class. That's where my focus is going to be.
Great. Kind of piggybacking on the healthcare question or your comments about that, we have a health care question and it's two parts. The first question of that is, do you support or oppose repealing of the Affordable Care Act? And then the second part is, regardless of that position, what specific ideas do you have to expand access to healthcare, keeping costs down, and making sure that the healthcare delivery system is financially sustainable?
Sure. So I don't know anyone who thinks that the Affordable Care Act is the perfect healthcare proposal. It was never meant to be the be-all, end-all. But to repeal it during a pandemic, kicking 20 million Americans off of healthcare and exposing 100 million Americans with pre-existing conditions to the prospect of being denied healthcare is simply cruel and untenable. It doesn't make any sense whatsoever to repeal the ACA without a replacement. Unfortunately, that's what this administration has been trying to do. And even then they failed when they had the House, the Senate, and the White House, which shows just how much the American people oppose this really cruel policy. Now, what is my solution for healthcare is I believe in a universal single-payer healthcare system. I'll give you three really good reasons for that. One, it's a moral obligation. Healthcare is a human right. America is the wealthiest country in the world. We have more resources and technology than anyone out there. Yet, 70,000 Americans a year die waiting for health coverage. 550,000 Americans a year have to file for medical bankruptcy. This is untenable, it's unsustainable, it's simply wrong. Two, I believe in individual liberty and individual freedom. I don't like the fact that people are tied to their employer and cannot move to a different job without having to switch their doctor, switch their healthcare provider. If you're like my wife, Aisha, and I, and you have 3 kids, switching your kid's doctor is even that much more difficult, especially if they have allergies or specific health conditions. Finding the next doctor is extraordinarily difficult. Likewise, if you want to start your own business, it's a massive overhead to afford on your own when you're already paying taxes. And on top of that, if you don't go with health insurance, how many people are tied down and unable to move about freely? If you're an artist or a gig worker or somebody who wants to be a musician, you're suddenly tied down. So because I believe in individual liberty, I want people to have access to healthcare and have their taxes actually pay for their healthcare. And finally, it's much more affordable. There's a recent study by Yale University published in The Lancet that proved that it would cost about $450 billion less per year to have a single payer system. And the reason for that, a lot of folks forget, is that the reason why healthcare is so expensive right now, one of the main reasons, is insurance companies have a massive overhead, 18 to 20% overhead. And we don't need to look at other countries to see what they're doing. We already have the Medicare infrastructure built out here in the United States. So it's not even inventing a new wheel, it's simply working on the system that we have. There's a common objection made from a Koch brothers study that healthcare would cost about $32 trillion over the next 10 years. And that's exactly right. But the second part of the study is that the current model as it is would cost about $34 trillion. So anyone who knows basic math knows that it's better to spend less to get full coverage with no copays, no deductibles, full choice of your doctor, as opposed to spending what we have right now, an absolute morally repugnant system where 70,000 a year die and 550,000 a year file for medical bankruptcy. So for those 3 reasons, and there's many more, I think this is the right way to go. It will make our economy stronger, it will make us safer and healthier, and it will cost less.
Well, thank you. And our final topic this afternoon is on transportation. And as you know, our transportation system is complex with public transit, ports, airports, roads, bridges, tunnels, interstates, on, and they're governed by a hodgepodge of entities, authorities, local, state, and federal governments, and even some private entities. And the disparate governance and funding streams impede efforts to provide quality and efficient transportation systems. To address these challenges, particularly as localities and regions grow into mega regions, how do we create a structure where all the puzzle pieces fit into an interwoven and more functional system?
Well, I don't think there's any one magic silver bullet that can create that framework, but I think we need to begin by working on a bipartisan basis. I was happy to see the House pass a bipartisan transportation and infrastructure bill in July of this year. Unfortunately, my opponent and some other folks voted against it, but this is a bipartisan bill sitting on Senator McConnell's desk right now. It's a $2 trillion package, if I'm not mistaken, that not only provides infrastructure repair, but also high-speed rail, public transport, broadband internet, which we critically need, especially for small businesses. And it ensures accessibility. It's also going to go ahead and ensure that we are creating millions of new jobs, high-paying jobs throughout the country. So it will be a massive economic boost. Look, right now we are a D- in infrastructure on the world scale. Again, to be the wealthiest country on earth, to have the most advanced technology and be a D- is a deliberate failure of supporting the needs of working families. This is why our campaign doesn't take any corporate money whatsoever. We are accountable to working families, to small businesses, to people who work hard for a living. That's who we will always be accountable to. And what this infrastructure bill does is it provides those working families high-paying jobs, the resources they need to build out their infrastructure and ensure that it's done in a timely manner. I'll just say broadband internet, for example. The lack of broadband during this pandemic has been devastating to small businesses, to children in school, to healthcare providers, to telehealth, and to our farmers. We argue that healthcare, or that that broadband internet needs to be a utility so that people have consistent access and small businesses can contend with other businesses around the country. This is an infrastructure issue. And on day one, when we're in office, we're going to introduce the Rural Broadband Authority, which will allow us to directly inject federal dollars into local municipalities. Chattanooga, Tennessee did this 10 years ago, and now they have 10 gigabyte per second high-speed broadband for all of their citizens as a utility. And the studies show that those localities that do that see immediately an 8% spike in their economic output. The US Department of Agriculture did a study just last year that said it would result in a $60 billion economic increase, with much of that going to small businesses. So we need to look at these things as a matter of basic livelihood and long-term success for working families. That's what I'm focused on. I think that's the solution to move forward with.
Qasim Rashid, thank you so much for being with us on behalf of our three chamber sponsors. Angie and I really appreciate you taking the time to speak with us, and we look forward to sharing this conversation with the Peninsula's business community.
It's my privilege to speak with you both, Tom and Angela, and I look forward to the opportunity to speaking with constituents. I certainly hope to earn your vote. And if you have questions, you can reach out to us at rashidforva.com. You can vote either absentee in person, by mail, or on election day. Please make sure you wear your face mask, socially distant, and let's participate in what makes this country truly great, our democracy and civic participation.
Thank you.
Very good. Thank you so much.
Thank you both. I appreciate that immensely. Really do.